let's chat summertime progression for bass, really how the different baits I use and how I approach. This is going to be summer patterns. Now this is a specific easy way to do it for the Twin Cities area. There's a multitude of different ways you can do this. There's all kinds of variations, I totally get it, but this is kind of my rundown for summertime lineup. I'm going to talk from docks to shallow to deep and how I'm targeting bass, at least from my perspective, and how you're going to probably get bit the most. So starters, in the summertime, water temps are in the mid to upper 70s. They're even teetering on low 80-degree water temp. This is surface temp, and those are the time of years I'm starting to use these kind of patterns. So as the day progresses, as we understand as anglers, these fish will make movements from shallow to deep. As the warm days, cloudy days, positions can change, but this will give you a broad spectrum on things to use. And we're just going to target specifically here on presentations. So these would be, let's say, 7 or 8 rods that I'm going to have on the deck of my boat all summer for bass. For starters, when we think deep fishing, we think anything from, let's say, 10 to 25 feet of water. And deep is always relative on the body of water you're fishing. So deep could be 14 feet weed line, deep could be 25-foot weed line. So every lake's different. So pay attention to your deep weed line, what the depths are, where the weeds are growing, all that kind of stuff. And when I'm fishing deep, in the summertime, I tend to turn to a spinning rod, and I'm fishing a jig worm or a Ned rig or something to that effect. So I'm either fishing a Ned rig, I'm taking just your favorite Ned head. I got a Mr. Twister Ned ringer on there. There's a variety of variations of Ned rig type baits. So many options out there, but it's a very, very easy, effective way to catch fish. It's a cast, let sit. The rod's doing the work. The reel's picking up the slack. I'm using a 15 to 20 pound main braid with a fluorocarbon leader, usually an 8-pound or 10-pound fluorocarbon leader. So that's a Ned rig. That's a great way, a very versatile way to catch a lot of deep water bass and just cover water. I'm also fishing a jig worm, and really, in my opinion, the difference between a Ned rig and a jig worm is a jig worm is going to be more of your worm style bait. I got a longer shank hook. I'm looking at about a 6.5-inch profile bait right here with this tri-live crawler. You can use a twister tail, worm, that kind of stuff. You can use a straight Senko Kamita type worm, but this is going to be more of your jig worm. It's going to fall generally slower. It's going to have a larger profile in the water, and you got a longer shank hook. I might not want to always make as much contact with the bottom with a jig worm as I would a Ned rig. So if I'm going to work taller weed stocks, things like that, I might pitch a jig worm in there and give it a different look. But I'm still fishing the jig worm and the Ned rig in very similar situations. So deep water application works exceptionally well. Same thing. I'm using a 7.5 foot medium light, medium action rod. I got my braid main line, I got my fluorocarbon leader, and I got a 2500 to 3000 series Shimano reel. That's going to be another option for deep water bass. The next one, playing off kind of the similar feel, is going to be a drop shot. And I think a lot of anglers overlook the drop shot. And the drop shot application is fairly simple. What this is I have, I'll take it off and I'll show you. I got my hook here, and I got about a 1 foot lead for a weight. So that weight's going to hit the bottom, and this is where that presentation is going to be fished. It's more of a finesse application. If I know there's fish there and they're just not taking anything else, I can usually get them to go on a drop shot. Here I have a worm hook in a tube. You can use a minnow bait, you can use a fleck bait, you can use a small twister tail. There's a lot of ways to fish a drop shot. But this is another really effective deep water application. And from there, you're just going to fish a various amounts of weights depending on the depth, conditions, wind, all that kind of stuff will determine the weight I'm fishing. But those are 3 easy ways to put the spinning rod in your hand and plastic fish for a variety of summertime bass applications. And I'm going to be turning to this application, one of these 3, pretty hard here most of the summer. Now, when you start talking about jigs and flipping, another really good way to catch bass in the summertime is to flip. Flip heavy milfoil, flip coontail, curly leaf pondweed. There's all kinds of ways to flip lily pads. And then you pick up a flipping rod. Now this can be fished, I would say, anything from a foot of water up to 10, 12, 13, 14 feet of water. It doesn't matter. Again, the weight on here will determine how fast it sinks, how quick it punches through heavier cover. So the heavier weight, I'm going to flip into some of the heavier cover. And for this, I'm using a braided line, anything from, it just depends, 30 to 65 pound test. I got 50-pound braid on this rod, heavy action rod, beefed up stick. I'm using a heavy duty trocar hook on here, a 5/0. I got about a 1 ounce weight on here for the situation I've been flipping the last few days in heavier cover, and I'm fishing that flipping out bait from Mr. Twister. So I'm fishing this Texas rig, weedless, I got a little bobber stop there holding that weight in place, and I'm fishing this style of application. Now I fish just into something, I let it punch through the heavy stuff, I want it to hit the bottom, I'm gonna give it a couple shakes. If I don't feel a thump, I'm usually pulling it back up and I'm flipping to another spot. So very easy, effective way to catch a lot of bass in very heavy cover. The first three applications I showed you with the spinning rod are not gonna work in this situation. You're gonna get snagged up, you're gonna hate your life. That's where the flipping rod comes into play. And this is a very precise way of fishing. You're gonna flip into the nastiest, heaviest junk. It's gonna punch through that main mat. It's gonna hit the bottom. You're gonna shake the rod a couple times. If you don't feel that thud, hook sets are free in bass fishing. You reel up, you pitch to another spot, and you do it again. So that's a very effective way to catch a bunch of bass in heavy cover during the summer months. And again, you might hear the term flipping or pitching. That's what that's gonna be right there. And I'm using a heavy action rod because I wanna horse them out of there and I wanna own them quick. Another option, if you don't wanna turn to a plastic to flip, is you actually can flip a jig. This is the all-terrain Grassmaster. So same thing, 3/4 ounce, 1 ounce, 1 1/4 ounce head. Same concept, but it's all in one nice, neat package. So I just put a pocket craw in the back of there. I can flip this the same way I'm flipping that bullet pegged weight and plastic. I can flip a heavier jig. Same idea. I can flip it into heavy cover, give it a couple bobs, pull it back up, do it again. And that's the Grassmaster, same concept. Super effective. There's various types of jigs. You have rattling AT jig, you have all kinds of stuff that are gonna be more of a, I don't know, a flip-in variation of a swim jig, so you can pitch it, you can work it back to the boat, and that's gonna have a little slightly different head, not designed as much to just punch through heavy cover, but to be more versatile. So you can fish that around docks, you can skip it, you can flip it around. So jig fishing, as a general rule of thumb, is an effective way to catch a lot of bass in the summertime. Now, talking docks, we talked about skipping jigs, flipping jigs around docks. Now, another effective summertime pattern is to skip and fish underneath canopies, boat docks, all that kind of stuff. And in that situation, I'm throwing a Wacky rig. I'm using a pocket fry, a Kamito, or a Senko. I'm using a plain hook. We've all seen Wacky rigs a million times. I'm casting this up under that dock, and I'm waiting for a fish to bite. I'm using a medium action spinning rod, braid mainline, fluorocarbon leader, and I'm letting this thing marinate and do its thing. Very effective way is to skip docks. Another type of rod I'm gonna have on the deck of my boat if I come up to a good dock. A lot of bass live under docks in the summertime. They're finding that shade. There's a lot of bluegills under there. Very good way to pull a big fish out of a lake is to skip a dock. And the last presentation I'll chat about here is gonna be a topwater frog. And the frog is nice because you get a lot of summertime fishing. You get a lot of weeds, a lot of weed growth, a lot of matted up stuff. Lily pads are up, and it's tough to fish through that at times. So I will turn to a frog, and I'll throw a frog on top of all that stuff. I'll fish it slow, I'll fish it through the duckweed, I'll fish it next to dock lines that have a lot of weeds choked up on them, and I can fish this very effectively in very heavy cover. And the thing to remember on a frog is don't always set the hook when you see the blow up. You see the blow up, you wait a second or two, you wait for your line to make some movement, you set the hook, because a lot of times if you set the hook when you see the bite, you miss them. And I'm using a beefed up rod again. I'm using 50 or 65 pound braid, 7.5 foot heavy action rod, good Shimano casting reel, and away we go. So a lot of ways to target these summertime bass. Those are the rods that generally get the nod on my boat, and I can pretty much effectively cover any situation that's thrown at me here in the Twin Cities and find some fish here in the summertime. So a lot of ways to do it. Great time here to catch some fish, adapt, change, move, be creative, and have some fun out there.